This is exciting to be a part of this presentation and frankly, this series. I'm Steve Armstead, and as you mentioned, I'll be joined by Ray Marantz. I know for both of us, because every time we get a chance, Ray and I get a chance to chat, it's usually with some excitement over butterflies or what we've been seeing. So for us to share kind of our passion with you all, it makes this really a fun event for us as well. So I know this is part of a series of webinars we've been doing as part of Xerces in the life of, and previous webinar kind of focused on the butterflies on the west side of the Continental Divide going towards the Pacific. And through this webinar, the information Ray and I'll be sharing is really relevant to the flip side of the Rockies and out to the Atlantic coast and out to the Gulf of Mexico. So the rest of the country east of the Rockies. And so we are glad to share a little bit of some of these beautiful creatures that you can hopefully see bouncing around the habitats and the world around you. Ray, you want to go to the next slide?
I'm sorry, I don't. There we go.
There we go. Perfect. So before we jump into it, just wanted to share for those of you who may not be familiar with the Xerces Society, but we are a nonprofit organization that protects wildlife through the conservation of invertebrates and their habitats. So we actually have been around for over 50 years, so we have a long history of working and doing, I think, excellent work in this arena. And we have actually staff and offices throughout the country. So we are really a nation and actually but international in the work that we do to help provide information and practices around what we all can do to make the world a little bit better for invertebrates. Next slide, please. We do that primarily through several different approaches. One is, it's important to really have good information to know about how you want to manage or what you can learn so that you can actually put practices in place that make a difference. So we do a lot of scientific research, do status assessments and surveys, and develop management studies around a lot of the invertebrates, pollinators, that help to make sure that if there are certain imperiled species, we can bring that information to bear to help make good choices, whether it's policy decisions or management practices decisions. We do a lot of education and training. This webinar is a great example of that, where we try to share information, grow understanding, build appreciation, and activate everybody to take actions that help achieve our mission. We engage in policy and advocacy, so to make sure if there's levels of ways we can engage in national politics or even in statewide politics and create policies that will help provide protections or conservation. We're engaging on that level. And then also we have a lot of staff, Ray and I both do a lot of this part of work as well, in terms of how do we help to restore areas or improve the habitat conditions, work with landowners, with land stewards, managers, private individuals to help give them tools and good information about what they can do in the spaces that they may have some responsibility for to make that a viable spot to host and be a habitat for invertebrates. So many different approaches and ways that we really try to achieve the outcomes of what we're trying to work for, the protection of invertebrates. Next slide, please. So with our webinar today, we just wanted to provide kind of a quick intro to butterfly biology, just to cover the bases again of this fabulous creature and a little bit about some of its unique life cycle and its place in our environment. Introduce just the broad concept of some of the butterfly family, so you understand some of the broad ways we categorize different types of butterflies. And then really talk a little bit more about the diversity, what you can expect and why you can expect different things east of the Rockies. And then really dive more into plants and the butterflies themselves. So that's the relationship that is really pretty fascinating and reflects a lot of that diversity and empowers a lot of that diversity. So we'll cover that as well. And then we'll hopefully have some time for some Q&A at the end as well. Next slide. So to begin with, and this is kind of the beginning of the butterfly itself, is to think about the life cycle. Something that, again, it's not probably unfamiliar to many, but I think it's still important because it really sets the place for how butterflies, exist in the environments around us and why they exist and the certain strategies they apply, as well as the certain risks that they endure during their life cycle, to know that, they have to have habitat, they have to have space to complete their entire life cycle. So you think about a tiny butterfly egg that's being laid perhaps on the underside of a leaf. It's, going to take several weeks maybe to develop, and then go through a stage where out of that tiny little egg develops a tiny little caterpillar. And so that caterpillar immediately needs to start feeding to be able to gain size, so it can kind of change from this tiny little mass of an egg up to the size of what will eventually be an adult butterfly. And so that caterpillar has to go through several different growth stages, or instars, or kind of the change out where the exoskeleton of a caterpillar is suddenly becoming too cramped as that caterpillar is eating away and gaining too much mass. It's got to shed its external skeleton and move into a much larger skeleton. So typically, from a tiny, tiny little caterpillar up to a large, nearly ready to metamorphosize caterpillar, you might have anywhere from 5 instars, sometimes maybe a minimum of 4, up to a maximum of 6. But as displayed here with the monarch caterpillar, you've got, 5 instars, growth stages that this caterpillar goes through before it's ready in its cycle to turn into a chrysalis, where it will change into, kind of through that incredible process of an adult butterfly, which will close and then be available on wing. So each of these life stages need, again, to be recognized to how they play a role in the butterfly and the butterfly diversity. So next slide, please. So when we think about butterflies and kind of, again, their life cycle, it's important to really understand what is it they need? What do we need to be attentive to help make sure that they're going to be able to thrive? So pieces that we just talked about, the different life steps, but also the instars that a caterpillar needs to complete. So they need a lot of food to grow, change from that tiny egg to a much larger caterpillar and eventually into a butterfly. So they need host plants, plants that are going to be compatible for them to digest and increase their mass. As an adult, they're going to need nectar from a flower to be able to fuel the activities of adult. When it's not good weather, when conditions are not less than ideal, they're going to need a safe place for either a temporary shelter or potentially a more secure and safer place for kind of waiting out either a real dry time frame or maybe a harsh winter. So they're going to need habitat, places where it's good for them to find shelter, and they're going to need protection and reduced risks from pesticides. Next slide, Ray. So thinking about kind of what pollinators need, they also have kind of key roles in the ecology of our systems. They really play important roles as grazers, as pollinators, as prey, but also have roles for relative to being invertebrate ambassadors in community science. Next slide. So in terms of being, key ecological roles, as a grazer, we know that caterpillars finding a plant that is compatible with what it can digest and grow and enhance its size. So it's going to go through those stages and be pretty voracious eater. So they actually have a very important role at kind of keeping a balance and in check certain types of plants, whatever they may be kind of dependent upon. They're going to be able to kind of help create a diversity in the different types of plants that occur in an area by kind of being a balance on the growth of plants or the maturity of certain plants. Some, like the black swallowtail here, are pretty voracious and can do quick work on a dill plant. Others may barely even touch a plant, but all the same, they are part of the mix of what helps to keep a balance between our wildlife kingdom and the plant kingdom as well. As a pollinator, they're perhaps, not our best pollinators. That role really falls to our bees, but they do play a role in pollination, as they are certainly nectar gatherers and they need the nectar, which means they're visiting flowers and transferring in that activity. the pollen between different plants and helping with the reproduction. So they do have a role as pollinators and an important aspect there. And then perhaps where they, certainly lend a lot to every other creature that is in and around their environments as potential prey, whether that's prey to other invertebrates or prey to, many of our birds and other small mammals and other animals that are dependent upon, utilizing invertebrates to help raise their own young and generations. They also play a key role as kind of ambassadors that, we know we are able to see butterflies in our environments around us. Their beauty certainly is something that causes us to have attention to them. And so they've, for long and for, hundreds and even thousands of years have been something that have kind of had special appreciation and recognition, in part because of, their magical flight, but also their colors that connects us to the invertebrates around us. And so I think they have always been something that can create a window into people wanting to know more about insects, invertebrates, but also then perhaps take an interest there and start exploring other invertebrates and the roles they play in the environment around us. They also are incredibly important for us to understand more about the role of invertebrates in the habitats, their needs for habitats, and to connect us with the invertebrates through various, community science efforts. Here you see an individual collecting a monarch and a butterfly net where we're going to tag them. And I know Ray will share more about monarchs a little later. But it's butterflies themselves really present an opportunity where we can look at them, find them, get people engaged with their passions and their interest to go out and find them and help to understand more about the environment around them and the way those, ecological relationships are relevant to them or relevant to, the butterflies that they may learn themselves. Next slide. So, as we kind of explore butterflies, it's helpful to understand kind of the 6 main families that we group butterflies into. The first is the skippers, which are kind of the small, and I'll get into this in a little bit more, but kind of the small group of butterflies. The large kind of big soaring butterflies are the swallowtails, which you can see how they're aptly named with the long tails on them. There is another group of butterflies, which are kind of the whites and sulfurs. Next slide. And then a group of tiny, smaller butterflies, which are the gossamer wings. We'll touch on each of these just a little bit more. The brush-footed butterflies, the monarch being a great example of that. And then a group that we don't often see as much, but they're present and around our environments, are the meadowlarks. Next slide. So with the skippers, these are, kind of 2 different subgroups within the skippers. The first is kind of the grass host skippers, the grass-dependent skippers. These are usually, again, focused on monocot plants as their caterpillar hosts. They tend to be very small, could be a dime-sized type butterfly. They usually have fast, darty flight and stay usually low to the ground. And they're often in a brown or an orangish color with some checkered marks or some dots on them. When they are usually stationary, if they're sunning themselves or if they're nectaring, they hold their wings in kind of 2 V's. So the wings aren't all in the same plane, which is one way to quickly kind of separate them out from any of the other butterfly groups. And one of the key things for kind of identifying a skipper versus a butterfly is to look at the antennae, and you'll see kind of a hooked bulb at the end of it. And we'll see a better example of that in the next picture, right? If you want to go to that, which is represented by, you can see this picture here. If you look at the tip of the antenna, you can kind of see almost a spatula type kind of hook on the end of the antenna there versus a butterfly, which has more of a true club on the end of its antenna. So within the skippers, we have the grass dependent ones, and then a separate group, which are the dicot skippers. So these are the flowering plant dependent skippers. So they're more associated with dicots as their host plant. They're still small, but they may not be quite as tiny as some of the grass skippers. And again, they different from the grass skippers. Their wings are usually in a kind of flatter and all in the same plane, but the same small darty flight that you'll see with any of the skippers. Next slide. On kind of the other side of the spectrum are our swallowtails, some of the largest of our butterflies that you'll see, sometimes gracefully flying by, soaring by. They have the long tails. Normally, there are some of the swallowtails, the Parnassian, which do not have the tails themselves, but you can see where they get their name from is the long kind of spire coming off the hind wing and mimicking or looking like the wings, the bottom of a wing of a swallow. They're usually black, yellow, or black and blue, and some of them even black and white. So usually bright, radiant, beautiful colors with some blues and reds on them as well. And as host species usually find these usually using many of our woody or tree species as hosts. Next slide. Whites and sulfurs, these are probably butterflies more typically everybody has at some point a sighting of or a way to interact with. They're very common in and around many of our environments, an open field, an urban setting, even to our natural areas, you're likely to see a fast flying white or a sulfur butterfly zipping through. These are the ones that are hard to actually sometimes get a good photograph because they are not usually patient. They don't wait and nectar very long. So you've got to be awful tolerant to try to get a good photo. They can be varying size from fairly small to mid-size or even larger in kind of the scale of different butterflies. And they're very wide distribution. So you'll see them throughout kind of the US in many different areas, primarily in grassland type environments. And in general, there are many, most of them are specialists, although, are not habitat specialists. Although there are a few. I know here in Colorado where I live, we have the pine white, which is actually a specialist on pine trees. So a few of them have kind of special palettes for host plants, but most in general kind of have pretty broad general requirements. Next slide. And just on the kind of on the contrary, so we looked at the white there, and kind of the other group within the whites and the sulfurs are aptly colored, the yellowish sulfurs that you'll also see flying around in many of those same spaces. You see here example of a little yellow, so a very common yellow butterfly and seen throughout most of the eastern part of the US. Next slide. The gossamer wings, these are, I think, some of them the most enjoyable to see sometimes, given the colors that we see. They're given that name again because of the shimmering appearance. You'll often see kind of the gossamer of a spiders, and it kind of is where it gets its name from. There can be a very diverse family. They are usually smaller butterflies, so dime or maybe a nickel size. They often have bright blue colors, sometimes greens or coppers, and many of them have dots or some eye spots on them as well. And there's kind of several groups within the gossamer wings, including blues, coppers, and hair streaks. And you can see this one here is actually blue, but it'll kind of trick us a little bit. It actually has a little bit of a tail on it, since it's the eastern tail blue, which kind of gets us to think sometimes it might be a hair streak, which we'll see here in a minute. Go ahead and next slide. So there is separate from the blues are the groups of hair streaks, which actually all of them will have these little tail protrusions off the end of the hind wing, which can oftentimes fool a potential predator into kind of going after the wrong end of the butterfly itself. So it's kind of could be a little deceptive trick here by our little gossamer wing. This is an example of the Edward hair streak, but they often have, again, beautiful colors, eye spots, and usually bands of spots on them. So usually when you have a chance to see a hair streak in general, it's usually a really rewarding experience. Next slide. Another kind of really broad and important group of butterflies are the brush-footed butterflies. And these are kind of separated by others by the fact that there are 4 legs that you see them actually walking on, and then the front legs have been modified into kind of comb-like brushfoots, which Ray was showing there with the cursor. So usually, you can see if you see a butterfly with usually primarily 4 legs, you're going to easily be able to categorize it into a brush-footed. But these are very diverse in kind of the looks they have and the variety of different butterflies that fall into this camp. It's also one of the most diverse butterflies throughout the US and frankly in the world itself. Next slide. So examples again for some of these brushwoods include the monarch butterfly. Next slide. The border patch. Go ahead, next slide, Ray. And out in Colorado, where I am, or in some of the more western states, we have a variety of different fritillary butterflies, which can be fairly challenging to tell apart and make kind of life a little bit tricky, but they are all part of these four primary legged butterflies, and beautiful to see is with their orange and checkered patterns, and usually are fairly good size, so quarter size or even larger $half size butterflies. Next slide. And then the last family is worth mentioning, although they're usually a little more difficult to find and locate, which are our metal marks. They are a very diverse family. In the neotropics, we have fewer of them in North America, but they are present. But when you do see them, they are also very gorgeous with kind of that metallic sheen to them and metallic spots. So definitely worth the opportunity to stop and look if you get a chance to come across a metal mark. Next slide. So I know in Kevin's webinar talking about the diversity of butterflies west of the Rockies, elevation and precipitation played a key role in helping to kind of direct the diversity of different types of butterflies and why the diversity was occurring in certain areas. And on a kind of similar basis, looking east of the Rockies, elevation still has an important role there, especially in kind of the mountain states itself. And if you think along the Appalachian mountains themselves, so it still has a role, but probably a bigger factor throughout most of the eastern part of our country is the fact that there is a lot more moisture throughout most of the states. So that kind of certainly increases and changes the type of plants and vegetation that are available, and therefore the diversity of butterfly species that'll be around. The other thing that has a real impact, of course, is just kind of the latitude. So where are you relative to kind of how long of a summer, spring, fall, winter is a butterfly going to experience, and how is it going to survive during those less hospitable times of the year? So all that is kind of a trigger to influence where we see and what types of butterflies we see in different areas. Next slide. So with that impact of, okay, we're in a further north state within our eastern part of the country, we have harsher winters. How perhaps will butterflies who are dependent upon growing plants and flowers and nectar to survive, to be able to reside during the wintertime? And we have different strategies that some butterflies will overwinter through the egg stage. Nice little kind of simple form of life, part of the life stage, to be able to endure the time frame it takes to wait out the cold and the cold, to be able to kind of complete the life cycle by hatching a small caterpillar out back when the spring or summertime, when plants begin to grow. So bronze copper is an example where it will kind of wait out through a tiny little egg on the underside of a plant until the conditions are right. Other caterpillars use the strategy of overwintering as a caterpillar. The hackberry emperor here, living on hackberry trees, it usually congregates together as caterpillars, both when they feed, but also in the wintertime, they'll group up and kind of curl up under leaves and utilize the leaves as a shelter to overwinter as a caterpillar. Therefore, when the conditions grow again, they can be quick and active to take advantage of the new growth on a hackberry tree. Some caterpillars, like many of the swallowtails, will utilize the chrysalis stage to overwinter. You've got a nice protective outer casing that hopefully will help you be resistant to the chills and the cold conditions. And then lastly are some strategies where some butterflies, like the Milbert's tortoiseshell here, actually are able to find secluded places in bark of trees or in wood piles and overwinter as adults, so that as soon as conditions get warm enough again, they can be out on wing. And so I know every springtime, the first butterflies I'm always super excited to see could be perhaps a mourning cloak or a butterfly like this, the Milbert's tortoiseshell. Next slide. So surviving cold is important, but even in the east where there's more milder temperatures sometimes or more moisture precipitation, still doesn't mean parts of the country aren't dry or hot during stretches of the summer. And so butterflies too need to have adaptations or behaviors that help manage around those types. An example here is the regal fritillary in our Great Plains and some of our tallgrass areas, that when it does get very hot and dry, perhaps in those months of July and August, a female may actually come out of her chrysalis in June, and then usually will be quickly mated, but doesn't actually go and lay those eggs until later in August or September. So she'll actually just go into kind of a rest state or estivation. Finds a spot down in the bottom of grasses and kind of a well-protected spot and wait out that couple of months. She may become active a little bit to find some nectar, but otherwise it's kind of a low active time, and kind of wait out the heat and the lack of growth in many of the plants that her caterpillars are going to be dependent upon, violets, until they can kind of be a little cooler temperature and growth resumes, and then she'll be out laying eggs around finding the host plants. So next slide. So butterfly diversity is kind of dependent upon the various conditions in an area. And it kind of can range pretty broadly between, certainly different areas. But I think we're pretty fortunate here in the US. We've got a lot of area, but we also have an incredible amount of diversity. So if you just think about how many butterfly species occur in the United Kingdom, when we think about England, Wales, Scotland, and just maybe in your mind, give a quick thought of how many butterflies you think are in United Kingdom, and then we'll give you the answer here. It's actually 59. So we'll take a quick moment here and we'll compare that to some of the numbers we see in the US. But thinking about 59, it doesn't seem like a huge number, but actually when you think about learning the true kind of relationship of all those 59 species, where they occur, how they look different from each other, the plants that they're dependent upon, the environments they're dependent upon, that 59 species could take a lot of time to really understand, get to know, and to actually have a understanding about and learn from. So, 59 doesn't seem like a lot, but actually is when you put together kind of how much you have to learn about that. Next slide. Then you compare that to some of our states and even think about our smallest state here, Rhode Island. And again, think in the United Kingdom has 60 butterfly species. What might Rhode Island have? Next slide. Rhode Island itself has 122, so over double the number of butterfly species in the United Kingdom. So we've got a lot of challenge and fun ahead of us to learn about kind of the butterflies and that rich diversity that does occur. And here are just some examples from kind of a number of different states. So where I am in Colorado, you can see we have close to 300 different species. Ray in Oklahoma has 200. So, there is an incredible diversity reflecting kind of the range that we have of habitats and in different climate conditions across our states that kind of create an opportunity for perhaps over 600 species of butterflies to occur from the east side of the Rockies all the way out to the coast. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ray.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. Whenever I make any changes, it gets harder to, there we go, harder to advance the slides for a moment. Okay. I'm going to focus for much of my segment on what butterflies eat. What do butterflies eat? Well, Steve already talked about some of the things they eat. We're gonna talk about a few others first, and then really focus on the main things they eat. Some butterflies eat sweet sap. I was walking through an oak woodland on my farm 2 years ago, and to my great surprise, I saw a whole bunch of butterflies down at the base of a small elm tree clustered around the bark. what were they doing? They were consuming sap, so, sugary sap that was flowing out of the elm tree. The photo on the left shows you that there were multiple different butterfly species there. The largest one there, that's a mourning cloak. The photo on the right is the mourning cloak when its wings are opened up. Extremely beautiful butterfly, but I was absolutely thrilled to have these butterflies on my property nectaring on sap. I didn't have to do anything. The tree just exuded some sap, and the butterflies came and feasted on it. Another thing that butterflies do all over the world is some of them perform puddling, which is where they go down to the ground, either to dirt, to mud, or sometimes on roadsides. And they're trying to obtain mineral salts off of these surfaces. In this case, this is in northern Missouri, photo taken about 15 years ago, and it's a variety of butterfly species puddling on the mud, and they're able to suck up a little bit of moisture, and in that moisture are some mineral salts. Or if they're on a dry road surface, they can exude a little bit of moisture onto the road, and that moisture picks up the salts, and then they suck them back in. Many different species puddle. We've got some sulfurs on the left. We have some eastern tail blues in the middle, and a gorgeous swallowtail on the right, all exhibiting the same behavior. And by the way, they don't just puddle on roads and on mud. They'll sometimes land on you. This is a hackberry emperor butterfly sucking sweat off a coworker of Steve and I. And here's that coworker, Karen Jokala from the Minneapolis area. This is a photo I took many years ago before Karen and I were even hired by the Xerces Society. We worked together in a different capacity. But yes, you can have butterflies land on you and feed on your sweat. Pretty cool. But, and there are other things they'll feed on. They'll feed on fruit. They'll feed on things we don't want to talk about, things, that come out of the backs of animals. But the really exciting thing for me, what got me into butterflies in the first place, was their tight relationship with plants. I've loved plants and animals since I was about 5 years old, and butterflies were the perfect thing for me to focus on, because I'm able to study butterflies and plants together. In this example, this is the giant swallowtail, and we're seeing the egg and the larva on its host plant. So most butterfly caterpillars are host plant specialists. On the left, we see a photo of passion flower, which is a native plant here in much of the southern U.S. We have the Gulf fritillary caterpillar, and we have the Gulf fritillary adult. That caterpillar only eats passion flower plants. The female butterfly only lays her eggs on passion flower. So it's a really tight relationship. If you want to have caterpillars of that plant, of that butterfly, you need to have that plant. Luckily, the plant is easy to grow. Colorado hairstreak. This, of course, is from Steve's neck of the woods. It's a gorgeous butterfly. I've never seen this butterfly. These are photos by one of Steve's good friends. Its caterpillars only eat oak, specifically gamble oak, which is a tree, sort of a mid-elevation or lower elevation on the slopes of the Rockies, but a nice tight relationship. Another Rocky Mountain species that is a specialist is the Rocky Mountain Parnassian. Its larvae feed only on sedum, species of sedum, primarily on Sedum lanceolatum. And interestingly enough, the adults love to nectar on that same plant, on the flowers of that same plant. So if you want to have this beautiful Parnassian, you've got to have sedums out there. Another great example, this is from the central and southeastern U.S., the frosted elfin. You've got the cute little elfin butterfly on the left. The elfins are in the same family as the hairstreaks and the blues, the gossamer wing family. In my neck of the woods, their host plant is yellow wild indigo, the bright yellow flowers shown in the middle. But in the southeast, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, places like that, the frosted elfin uses sundial lupin. And that's a photo that I took a couple of years ago when I was in near Tallahassee, and great friends of mine took me on an expedition to find the frosted elfin. And what we had to do, we had to find the sundial lupin. Once we found the sundial lupin, we were able to find the caterpillar and the butterfly. Other butterflies have a more general palette. They're not hyper specialized. For instance, the mourning cloak, that gorgeous butterfly that I showed earlier feeding on sap. Its caterpillars feed on plants from at least 5 families, and some of the plants it feeds on are shown at the bottom: willow, aspen, elm, hackberry, hawthorn. I added an E at the end. I don't think there should be an E at the end of hawthorn. My apologies. Some butterflies are even more generalist than that. And the most generalistic butterfly in North America is the gray hairstreak. Its caterpillars feed on plants from at least 30 different plant families. By plant families, I mean things like the grass family, the sunflower family, the rose family. For those of you who haven't learned all the different plant families, just to give you an idea of what level of organization a family is. Families tend to be very different from one another. Well, these gray hairstreak caterpillars can feed on plants from many different families. So now we're going back to a specialist. The most famous of the specialists, in my opinion, is the monarch, because its caterpillars only feed on milkweeds, and the female monarchs only lay their eggs on milkweeds. So we see a monarch egg laid on some milkweed flowers on the left. We've got a monarch caterpillar eating those flowers on the right. So, little quiz. How many species of milkweeds are there in the US? Think of how many you've seen where you live and come up with an answer. How many species? Well, the answer is more than 100, which is good news for the monarch. And I see Debbie raised her hand. If you could post a question in the Q&A, that would probably be best. For most of you, I'm guessing on this webinar today, this is probably your most abundant milkweed where you live. Common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. It's got big floppy leaves that are sort of fuzzy and big spherical clusters of pink flowers. And it can be quite abundant in open fields that haven't been sprayed with herbicides. And it can spread pretty rapidly, which is great news for the monarchs. Unfortunately, of course, sometimes people spray and kill these, which is a great shame. But for most of you in the Northeast, the Midwest, the North Central, this is your most abundant milkweed. The light green here is indicating counties where this plant is found. For many of you, if your wet areas are going to have this species, this is called swamp milkweed, Asclepias incarnata. I strongly recommend this for your gardens. It's one of the easiest milkweeds to grow. If you're in the South Central states, like me, I'm in Oklahoma, this is your most abundant milkweed. Southern Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana. This one is super important for monarchs as they're flying back from Mexico in the spring. And if you're in the Southeast, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Southern Alabama, Southern Mississippi, this is one to be on the lookout for. Aquatic milkweed. That photo on the left is a photo I took in a Florida swamp. Notice how it's growing right in the water. And the photo in the middle is showing a caterpillar on that same plant that was growing in the water. So these monarch caterpillars are living above the water, which is pretty cool. On the right is a plant of the species growing in a pot, just as an evidence how easy this plant is to grow. You can grow it in a pot. It'll overwinter in a pot. It survived minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures when I had it in a pot. So very easy plant to grow. Consider trying to find this one if you're in the southeastern US. Don't forget about the grasses. They are important too. Many butterflies use grasses as their host plant, especially the skippers, like the Delaware skipper. The common wood nymph occurs pretty much throughout the region that's covered by this webinar, and it feeds on grasses. That is, its caterpillars do. So now let's shift to what the adults are feeding on. And Again, earlier I mentioned some feed on sap, some feed on sweat, some puddle, but the great majority of butterflies as adults spend a lot of time feeding on nectar. They are fairly generalist. They'll use a variety of nectar plants, but they do have preferences. For example, of the thousands of species of flowering plants in the central US where I live, monarchs only visit a few frequently. They tend to visit plants in the 4 families shown here. I tend to focus a little bit too much on wildflowers, annuals, and perennials that you could have in your garden, but don't forget about the shrubs and the trees. Shrubs and trees can be awfully important as nectar sources and as host plants for butterflies. So on the upper left, we've got willow. On the lower left, we have buffalo currant, which is mainly in the central US. In the center, we've got a cherry. To the right of that is buttonbush, which occurs almost throughout the region we're covering, except Colorado. And on the right, we have a Colorado plant, more of a Western plant, rubber rabbit rush, which is a terrific nectar source. Milkweeds, why are they coming up again? Because in addition to being really great for caterpillars, milkweeds are a fantastic nectar source for many, many species, including monarchs, but including many other butterflies. So this little butterfly, the coral hair streak, it's a gossamer wing, very delicate, very pretty, very cute. I never see these unless I'm going to a patch of butterfly milkweed in bloom. This butterfly really seems to specialize to some degree on the nectar of this plant. They will nectar on some other things, but this is their favorite. So if you want to have this butterfly, it'd probably help to have this gorgeous orange plant. Native thistles are fantastically important for butterflies. We've got tall thistle on the left and bristle thistle on the right. Tall thistle is mainly a plant of the Midwest, basically, centered around Illinois. Bristle thistle is a plant of the Southeast. And I have a lot of experience with both of these plants. On the left is tall thistle growing on my farm, and it's just started blooming here this week, and already it's getting bees and butterflies. And on the right, that is a bristle thistle that I photographed in Florida. It was feeding a monarch, and obviously the monarch is, I was able to get a few inches away from the monarch because the monarch was so in love with that nectar. It was, I couldn't scare it away. If you want to learn more about thistles, we have a native thistle guide. It's 92 pages. We really want people to grow more native thistles because they're so good for butterflies and other pollinators. To find this guide, just do a search for Xerces Thistle Guide. Coneflowers in the genus Echinacea are well known to be great nectar sources, and these will grow in gardens pretty much throughout our region, from Florida to Texas to North Colorado to North Dakota to Maine. It's a little tougher to grow them down in Texas, down in a hot, dry climate, but you can still do it. Joe Pyeweed, this is a plant primarily of the East and the Midwest. I have it blooming right now, and it is feeding plenty of butterflies. It tends to be tall with beautiful pink flowers. Sunflowers, just about any sunflower in the genus Helianthus is great for butterflies, including the most famous sunflower, the annual sunflower, the one that gives us sunflower seeds and sunflower oil. Legumes such as lupins and vetches can be excellent for butterflies. Particularly in the Rocky Mountains, you have higher diversity of lupins and vetches in the Rockies, but we have some in the East as well. Blazing stars, this is a plant, this is a genus, the genus Liatris, of the East and the central US. It gets to the Rockies, but it does not go west of the Rockies. So this is really, this genus of plants with beautiful pink and purple flowers is highly representative of the coverage area of this webinar. And I've seen many thousands of butterflies during my life nectaring on plants in the genus Liatris. Wild bergamot tends to be terrific for large butterflies like monarchs and swallowtails. Slender mountain mint If you haven't heard of mountain mint before, I'm glad you're here because mountain mint gets covered with pollinators when it's in bloom. And this is a plant that will grow through most of the East, the Midwest, even as far south as Oklahoma. So I strongly encourage you to look into this plant in your garden. You can grow this plant in Colorado too, as long as you irrigate it. And these are just a small sample of the butterflies that'll visit this flower. Goldenrods in general are terrific. They tend to bloom in fall. Asters also tend to bloom in fall. Great diversity of them. Just about all of them are good for butterflies. And then my single favorite nectar plant for my region is golden crownbeard, Verbicina and Celioides. It is an annual. Somebody gave me some free seeds. They mailed me an envelope full of seeds about 19 years ago, and I planted them, and I've had a colony of this ever since, and I've given away hundreds of thousands of seeds of this plant to other people, and I've never had to pay a dime for it. And yet it blooms from April until frost and feeds bees and butterflies the entire time. So it's quite the amazing plant. Okay, now that's the end of the road for me. It's time to turn it back to Steve.
Great. Well, I think Ray has kind of given us a great understanding of many of the plants here that are things we should think about in their relationship to different butterflies and how important it is to include native plants in our landscapes around us, help restore, conserve them in the natural spaces around us. But in those spaces that we do manage, it's important to think about, okay, which plants go in there, but also the relationship to making sure those plants, and especially the nectar sources, and this is important for butterflies, but all of our suite of pollinators, that they have food and sustenance throughout the warm season. So thinking about early spring all the way through fall. So if you're thinking about trying to enhance the space around you by planting more flowering plants, ideally native plants, give consideration to make sure you're putting in plants that are going to be blooming early in the year. Maybe some of the trees, the willow trees, or perhaps a maple. Thinking about those, the beard's tongues, penstemons that'll be blooming in the middle of the summer. And then maybe what about late summer? Is there something that you can plant to make sure it's present? And then make sure, because going into the fall, some of those late season butterflies, some of those that are on wing as adults throughout even winter, they're going to find shelter, are going to take advantage of plants like the rabbit brush or the goldenrods that stay bloom late into the fall, to be able to provide their nectar source to give them that last bit of energy to kind of wait out the cold. So thinking about making sure you have blooms throughout the season, having different types of plant families present, different bloom structures, all relate to providing a diversity of different plants that is only going to enhance and provide sustenance and resources for a diversity of the pollinators, as well as thinking about those other life cycles. So making sure you have, places that can be sheltered, leaving vegetation, maybe even having a wood pile or some brush around where it's safe to have that, so that there can be, protected species that think about the other life stages and kind of provide protection for the pollinators. It could be a butterfly, could be a bee, could be a number of different things. Next slide. So if we want to start thinking that in, where do I go for that information? Next slide. Is luckily one of the things that I'm so always impressed about with Xerces is the resources that we have available. So we have a number of different books that are available for purchase that I think are really good information resources. Get kind of in a single book, you can pull a lot of the information you've heard today in understanding about the plants, the different butterflies, and what you can do for butterflies or pollinators more generally, or how to help monarchs with the different types of plants for them. Next slide. And if you really want to start digging in, we have then also a lot of free downloadable information, guides and fact sheets that are regionally based or maybe broad based. So we'll hopefully have something that will help empower you with information that can maybe leverage you to take a next step to help do something that is supporting butterflies, but in essence, all of our pollinators. Next slide. So as Maria has mentioned, we have, information specific to the monarchs and pollinator plant list. Those are available on our website. I think having information about, when they're in bloom, what type of pollinators they may be benefiting, all are kind of key resource pieces that can give you the information that can help you select how does this going to work and fit in my garden and benefit pollinators. Next slide. So it's important. We want to, provide this information, but we need your help too. So it's important that you help spread the word about how to take actions to help pollinators. As an organization, we are incredibly dependent on donor supports for our ability to do the work, to bring information to you. So, we appreciate any level of support that we can get. That we do have memberships that are available to the organization to help continue this work. So we want you to be engaged and help us be engaged with making a difference for pollinators, butterflies, and invertebrates. Next slide. We also, want to thank our many Xerces supporters, many institutions, individuals, and companies that all contribute to us making a difference in the world around us for invertebrates. Last slide. So with that, we'll wrap up. I think we have a few minutes for questions. Ray and I'd be happy to share what we can and answer some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Thank you, Steve. Thank you both very much. That was very informative and very colorful between all the native flowers and the butterflies on them. It was definitely very pretty, very appealing to the eyes. We do have some questions coming in. So I guess just while we were still on it, we had a couple questions about that golden crown beard. If you could discuss its native range, and then we can move on to other subjects.
Yes, the core of its range is the desert. The core of its range would be New Mexico and the bordering state of northern Mexico. However, it is native to Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, western Nebraska. So I saw somebody ask, is it native to Illinois? No. However, people in New York plant purple coneflower. It's not native to New York. It's native to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, places like that. So a case can be made that it's not the worst thing to do to spread an American native somewhere else in the US. If you're a strict purist, I can understand that. And if you don't want to take an Oklahoma plant and move to Illinois, I can respect that. But you might want to give it a try. But that is not, it is again, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, and further west. But it is an amazing plant and very easy to grow in well-drained soils.
Thank you. Yeah, a little envious over here in the Pacific Northwest to have a bloom from April. We have many native wildflowers that can provide that nectar as well, but I would love to have more like that. All right. Let's see. Let's switch around subjects a little bit. Back to the concept of community science projects. Very early on in the presentation, I can't remember which one of you, but you shared some information about some of the monarch accounts. So we have someone who wants to know, is that community science project still open? They think it would be really interesting to be part of that, help catch and release monarchs and help study them.
I'd like to answer this one too, because I'm involved in that. And yes, as far as monarchs go, there is a program called the Monarch Tagging Program run by Monarch Watch, which is a nonprofit based in Lawrence, Kansas. And they have been producing tags, tiny little stickers. Each sticker has a unique identifier on it and an email address. And you purchase, you order tags, I think they're 10 cents each. And then they ship them to you. You capture some monarchs, you put tags, the tags on the monarchs, which again are stickers. They're very, very, very light. And therefore, if the monarch flies to Mexico and somebody finds it in Mexico, they can email Monarch Watch and say, hey, we found this tag in Mexico, and then they'll know how far it traveled and how long it took. So yes, that program is still ongoing, and it's a really fun one. The Xerces Society has a bunch of citizen science, community science programs ongoing too, primarily in the West at this stage. The Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper, for instance. But east of the Rockies, there's lots of monarch tagging, and you would go to Monarch Watch to order tags. It's extremely fun. I tagged monarchs this last fall. It was a blast.
I bet, yeah. On that subject, is monarch tagging available for Lake George? I'm not personally familiar. I don't exactly know.
I've heard of
specifically
Lake
which.
George. Is that Lake George, New York?
Not specified. I was thinking New York as well. So let's go with that for now. And
It should be.
Lauren can send us an email if that's not the Lake George we're talking about.
Sure. One could tag monarch. If one was able to find enough monarchs in Lake George, one could tag them for sure. Yep.
Okay.
You would do that in coming up soon. Probably the second half of August, mid-August, late August, early September, because Lake George, New York, I think is near the Adirondacks. So I think it's pretty far north. So they would leave there pretty early. So you'd want to order those tags as soon as possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that information. All right. Switching gears here. Let's go back to a little more biology. Someone wants to know, how can you tell if a caterpillar is poisonous? They would like to know, since they've read or seen lots of fluffy caterpillars and other caterpillars, and some of them don't have bright colors as a warning. So any other tips from either of you on how to tell if a caterpillar is poisonous?
I'll jump in, and Ray, feel free to tag along here. But I think it's a great question, because it drives, first, if you can, is to understand that relationship between what particular butterfly you're interested in and its caterpillar and the plant, because we've been talking a lot about the association of certain butterflies to plants. So if you know what a butterfly's host plant is, you might be able to learn if that host plant has certain chemicals or properties. Milkweed is an example. We talked a little bit about that caterpillar might be ingesting the toxins or some of the chemicals from that plant and utilizing those. So that's kind of a first start, but it also gets tricky because, certainly there's the tool of, or the trait of caterpillars and even butterflies utilizing warning colors to tell you, to warn around toxicity, but you also have the mimicry that occurs there as well. So, you might actually have something that has bright warning colors. You also may have a mimic, which is completely palatable, but, it's still brightly coloring warning. So I think the best thing is to, treat any caterpillar with respect for sure, and if you can dig in, learn a little bit about what it's feeding on. And if there's some history around that, there's sites like Butterflies and Moss of North America, a website that you can go to and learn about kind of the life history and what host plants are for different butterflies. And that may be a way to start. Spines certainly are something that are a nice defense mechanism for caterpillars, but it may be something that, again, the caterpillar itself hasn't ingested anything poisonous. It's just using the spines as a mechanism to help defend itself from other, predators, other predatory invertebrates, or, a larger animal itself. So feel free if you've got other thoughts, Ray, on that.
Nothing to add. I think you did a terrific job.
Thank you.
You know more than that than me.
Yes, definitely a good reminder to respect them all, whether they look poisonous or not. Similarly, on just sort of like look and body shape, etc., why do butterfly wings look fluffy?
I'll jump in a little bit here too. It's the wonderful aspect we really didn't get into, that is the Lepidopterus being the scaly winged insects, is that their wings are comprised of a bunch of tiny little scales that help provide protection, but also light reflection to help create the colors. And with that kind of those scales, sometimes you will see what appears to be kind of a fluffiness to the wings. So, and butterflies themselves also have hairs. So they're sensing the environment around them with hair. So you might actually also see true fluff, which is hair. You'll see that on the bodies, and you can see that as well on the wings themselves.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, if you can get close enough too, that you can see those scales. Okay, let's see, back to some host plants. Can either of you comment on the benefit of nettles as host plants?
Steve, I know they're good for things like question mark.
Yep, and painted
Um,
ladies will use them, red admirals will use them, so. In fact, I put some in my vegetable garden this year. The grasshoppers are getting them faster than my hopeful butterflies are landing on them. But I think that they do actually and are used as a host plant by a number of some more of our generalists, but they're there. Some of the same butterflies that like thistles will also oftentimes like nettles as well.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and on that subject, I know you mentioned this before, but if you could clear up the benefit of some grass species. We had a question where they were wondering if grasses do anything to help monarchs or swallowtails. The commenter always tries to plant many native plants. And I think the question is more about lawns versus native grass species. So if you could clarify if there are grasses that are beneficial to different butterflies.
Sure. Yeah, monarchs admittedly don't get a lot out of grasses, and neither do the swallowtails. Um, Certainly, sooner or later, they'll hunker down in some grasses, but you could have other plants do that. The grasses are more clearly important as host plants for the grass skippers, and some of our rarest butterflies are grass skippers. The Dakota skipper comes from North Dakota and Minnesota. It's on the endangered species list. What do its caterpillars eat? Grasses, native grasses. I think big blue stem and little blue stem perhaps. There are books that will tell you, or online resources like the Butterflies and Moths of North America. You can look up which the host plants of each species. And most of the grass skippers are going to use one or more grass species. Another important one is Eastern gamagrass. This is a very large species with very showy flowers for grass. It is the main host plant of the byssus skipper. So that's another rare species. So grasses are really important for some of the rare species. Admittedly, not that important for monarchs or swallowtails, but we at the Xerces Society we're trying to save them all the butterflies, all the bees, and all the different invertebrate species in the planet.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, getting on to some maybe bigger subjects. What effects of climate change are you seeing now, and possibly other effects projected into the future? I'm assuming on butterflies.
Well, we can both probably chip in from different perspectives here, and Ray, certainly I think here in the Rockies, it's certainly something we're very attentive to, as we've got a couple of different overlays. One is the variability of weather that we're experiencing with climate change can contribute to impact and put risks out there for the survival of butterflies. So you think about here in the Rockies, and unfortunately, I think our neighbors to the north, Canada, is facing a lot of severe wildfires right now, and I know we have other places. That's an aspect here. We have drier, hotter conditions, more severe droughts. Also leads to larger, more severe wildfires, which can have significant effects on large areas of land and kind of the consumption of many different habitats for our butterfly species. So I think historically, there may be smaller fires, that don't necessarily disrupt an entire habitat. A larger event could. So, this variability of conditions and kind of some of the severe weather situations certainly has implications for our butterflies. I think the other piece that's key there is, again, that relationship between butterflies and plants. As we have warmer conditions, changing seasons, it may actually change when a plant is available, or when a plant's in bloom, when a plant's growing, and be out of sync with the life cycle of a butterfly. And so that relationship has developed and kind of has a tight connection to it. As we have changing conditions, warmer temperatures, snow melts earlier, a plant grows earlier. Maybe that butterfly from an egg or a caterpillar that's overwintered hasn't synced up with that changing, the snow melting out earlier. So we get a kind of a mismatch of timing that can occur. So those are aspects of where climate change certainly can, is a risk and a threat of how we want to help do what we can do to help protect butterflies.
Yeah, I think that's Steve did a fantastic job of explaining that. And yeah, I do think in the mountain areas, in high elevation areas, it's going to be maybe even more extreme. But we're probably seeing some effects of climate change on the regal fritillary. The regal fritillary is the butterfly that Steve mentioned, whereby the female basically just hides in the grass in the middle of summer because it's so hot. And that's the normal behavior. But my point I'm bringing up the regal fritillary is it is more of a northern species. It barely crosses the border from Kansas into Oklahoma, probably because it's a little too hot here. It's too hot in Texas and most of Oklahoma for that species. But that species is probably the rarest butterfly in Oklahoma. I was paid a few years ago to do surveys for that butterfly, and we found 4. We found 4 in the entire state in a summer. So it's very possible that as our temperatures warm, Oklahoma will be too warm and they'll disappear entirely from our state. On the other side, there's a species like the giant swallowtail, the largest butterfly in North America, which used to not occur in Quebec, Canada, but now it's moved from southern Vermont all the way into Canada. So the warming temperatures up north is helping the species expand its range northward. I'm glad it can expand its range. That's a good thing, but are negative things happening to the species in other parts of the continent very possible?
Yeah, definitely both sides there. Thank you for that, both of you. Okay, so many good questions in here. We are not going to be able to get to all of them, but all right. How about another sort of a topical question? Someone wants to know about raising butterflies. They try to do so to help them survive either being eaten by a bird or be infected by a parasitoid wasp. Can either of you speak to recommendations or not for people trying to raise butterflies? Monarchs and spice brushes was a specific example.
You want to take that on, Ray, or I'm happy to if you.
Sure, I'll give it a go. I have raised butterflies, both for fun and for educational purposes, and for research purposes. At the Xerces Society, regarding monarchs, we've published a policy in which we're asking people that if you want to raise monarchs, do it in the most environmentally responsible way you can, and try not to raise any more than 10 at any one time. But we have a great fear that raising large amounts of, and it's not just us who have this fear, we are concerned about the possibility of new diseases or the spreading of diseases by raising large numbers of caterpillars in close quarters in confined spaces. And certainly there's research been published that says that monarchs that are raised indoors, when they are released, they are less likely to migrate properly. Their orientation is messed up. Now there's research on the other side saying that's not true, but at this point, we encourage people, we'd rather have people focus on improving habitat outdoors than bringing them indoors. But admittedly, and this is something, is a fascinating fact that I can give you about monarchs. I can't tell you about many other species, but a study has been done with monarchs. For every 100 monarch eggs laid out in the wild, one of them becomes an adult. the other 99 die on their way, on their, they die as eggs, or they die as caterpillars, or as pupae. So it's a tough world out there. And bringing them inside does increase, in most cases, will increase their survival rate. But we are concerned again about the eruption of diseases, especially the evolution of new diseases, and think that it's a better strategy to focus our effort on putting more habitat out there. Sure, there'll be mortality due to predators and parasites, but if we have enough habitat out there, there's going to be plenty of butterflies out there laying many, many, many eggs, and many of them will become adults. So that's where we focus. We prefer folks to focus their attention on putting habitat outdoors.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Thank you very much for tackling that question. And it's a great segue into this other one. You've talked about habitat, but what are any other things that people can do to help butterflies other than planting native plants? I know there was a little bit in the presentation as well, but just to reiterate points on how to help, how listeners can help butterflies.
Steve.
Yeah, I think one key piece is native plants, great. Flowering plants, great. But think about in kind of which plants can you plant that their caterpillars are going to need to be able to complete that part of their life cycle. And so some of our vegetation for different regional vegetation sheets of pollinator plant sheets help to indicate for which plants are good host plants for butterflies. And so target, if you can, making sure you add in different host plants for some of the butterflies that might occur in your area. So be even more specific about which plants you plant and why you plant those plants. So I think that's a piece there. The other is thinking about, and we kind of alluded to that, is that butterflies, whether it's an egg, a caterpillar, or even an adult, need shelter during when it's, seasons of less ideal conditions for them, over winter or maybe in the heat and dry. So thinking about if you can mow less in certain areas, if you can leave plant stalks in the winter season, making sure you're growing grasses is a place for them to secure some shelter in weather, rain or hail or bad weather conditions or in cool conditions. So thinking about the complete life cycle. And again, we have information available about how you can kind of provide broader habitat than just planting native plants.
Yes, and we did share some of those links in the chat. Thank you for that. Related about plants in their native ranges, we also had a question about someone wanted to know whether is it not good to grow milkweeds out of their native range? Can it mess with the monarch's systems? Can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah. Well, first off, we definitely want folks to focus on native milkweeds and not exotic milkweeds. We have a clear policy about that. But if you grew I live in Oklahoma. If I planted a milkweed from Florida in Oklahoma, would that mess up the monarchs? I don't know, but I've tried it and they seem to be fine. So I obtained seeds of aquatic milkweed, the white flowered species that was growing in the water. I showed you in one of my photos. And it's not native to Oklahoma, but I grew it in my garden and I had lots of caterpillars on it and they seemed to do great. Could there have been an impact on the adults? There could have been, absolutely. I am not aware of any research that has demonstrated that would be a problem, nor research that has demonstrated that it is clearly trouble-free. Obviously, I gave it a try. So interesting question. We need more research to figure that out, but very interesting question.
Yeah, thank you for that information though. All right, we have time for just one more. I was saving this one because I think it's fun. What can you tell us about butterfly ears?
That I'll leave for Steve.
Okay. Finish out on this one, Steve.
I love it. I think kind of what I'm gonna take that question as is how do they hear or sense the environment around them a little bit? And so I think we think about butterflies, kind of we can think a little bit about the hairs we were talking about earlier, is that those are important for sensing movements in the environment around them. And so that is one way they can, in essence, hear, that things are happening in the space around them. You move too quickly, that's going to trigger hairs on almost any invertebrate if they have hairs. Those are certainly a sensory type organ. The antenna can use smell, the vibrations they can feel through their feet. So I think, they may not hear the typical way we think about hearing. I mean, they certainly can take in noise, but I think they're actually fine-tuned to more chemical responses and movement responses and using their eyes as a way to sense the environment around them than really using noise as a trigger for them. So I think they probably have very tiny ears if we want to think about it, and they have to rely much more on their other senses.
Yes, thank you. That's really fun to think about.
It is a good one.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Ray and Steve's contact information is there on the screen. I want to thank you both, Steve and Ray. Thank you very much for sharing this information with us today. Thank you to everyone who joined us. If you could please take a moment to fill out that post-webinar survey, we'd really appreciate that. But any last comments from either of you before we finish here?
Last comment is there's still some nice months ahead with butterflies being out there, so go out and enjoy.
Yes.
Appreciate them.
Yes.
Amen to that. Amen to
Yes.
that.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you all.